Thank you everyone for joining us for part 4 of our 4-part series on Legionella identification and prevention. This part will be about outbreak prevention and management. My name is Ronnie. I am the Quality Assurance Manager for ED Lab, and today with me I have Dr. Sahai, the Lab Director of ED Lab. We'll go ahead and begin the webinar. So today what we'll cover is a really quick recap of parts 1, 2, and 3. We'll go over outbreak occurrences, prevention strategies, decontamination, and management. So a quick recap of the first 3 parts, and we'll go ahead and also we have a handout that's available with this presentation. At the very end of the presentation we have links for videos of the previous ones, and with the PowerPoint slides available as well, so that anyone can go ahead and follow, and if you missed out on anything you can go ahead and go to the previous ones. So quick recap, we went over the 5 W's of Legionella, such as who, what, when, where, and why, to kind of get a little bit of introduction on Legionella. We went ahead and talked about the ecology and pathology of Legionella. We went over laboratory techniques. We went over management, regulations, standards, and guidelines, preventive and corrective actions. And for the one of the parts, we went over ASHRAE 188, the standard and elements exclusively. Now for today's webinar, we'll go ahead and start. Dr. Sahai, what can you tell us about Legionella outbreaks?
First of all, good afternoon and welcome to all the viewers. That's very important to understand the topic. The most important thing is to understand that how the outbreaks happen, especially in case of Legionella. So let me first define the outbreak. Outbreaks are nothing but if 2 or more people are exposed to Legionella and get sick at the same time near about the same place, then they may be termed as outbreak. So the next thing which we need to understand that where these outbreaks normally takes place. Well, commonly these outbreaks are associated with building a structure that have a complex water system, such as hotel, resorts, long-term care facilities, hospitals, multi-story housing, cruise ship, etc. That's more vulnerable place, or the place where one can expect Legionella outbreak if the contaminant is there in that particular ecological niche. That's it about the outbreak. Now, Ronnie, you can also ask me that what are the potential source in case of especially the outbreak when it takes place in environment or in and around an environment. Well, for that, the very important factor or point is the source where Legionella reside or Legionella form, such as evaporative cooling system, potable water, whirlpool spa, industrial equipment, decorative and other features such as water mister, etc. These are more vulnerable because this might be a very potential site where Legionella can be found or reported. So these are few things I want to list you that these are more vulnerable place in case of Legionella outbreak happens. You must pay attention on this.
Now, not to scare our viewers, but will you go over the deaths for the past years from Legionella?
Well, as you may understand that the Legionella was discovered during a Legion convention in Philadelphia, and that particular episode, which was way back in 1976, there were like 29 deaths, and the CDC was called in, and that's how they have identified the organism, and they put the name like Legionella based on the Legion convention. Since then, in the recent years, such as you have seen in this slide, I have listed, like, in the Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, very recently 2015, Flint, Michigan, Bronx, New York, Chaves, New Mexico, Seattle, Washington. These are the few places on the map located across the United States having a lot of death during recent years. When I use recent year is between 15 to 16. So there is a lot of death. As you can see, I put the number on this particular slide.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Sahai. We will actually go ahead and launch our very first question. Go ahead and give everyone about 30 seconds to go over it and choose the answer. The question is, what is the common source for a Legionella outbreak? You have visiting a sick person, working in hospital, potable water, or none of the above. Give everyone about 5 more seconds. And we'll go ahead and close the poll now. And as you can see on the screen, the correct answer was potable water. 78% got it correct. So now we'll go ahead and continue with the webinar. Now that we've gone over the outbreaks, Dr. Sahai, what would be a good prevention strategy?
Well, the prevention strategy can be focused into 2 different themes. The first is the proactive measure, and the other is reactive measure. That's how we should look at the whole prevention strategy for preventing Legionella. Under the proactive measures, there are certain steps such as preventive action, a part of water management plan, periodical testing, and surveillance program, which I will be describing a little bit more in detail in coming slides. Then the reactive one is responding to a cluster or outbreak of Legionella. That's very important. Sampling and laboratory testing, investigating source-cause relationship, and appropriate cause corrective action. And last but not least is the efficacy of the entire program, efficacy of the testing regarding preventing the Legionella. So this is the whole part about the prevention strategy. So now, as I said, the preventive actions are going to be on various steps, but very first thing I encourage and would like to see that the building water system should maintain properly and appropriately. When I use the word properly and appropriately, that encompasses the manufacturer recommendation as well as on-site maintenance of the whole water system in and around a building. It is also important to keep eye on the water temperature and the pH monitor, because the pH monitoring and water temperature can tell us about the situation, it is favorable or not favorable for growing Legionella. That's why it is very important. And the other one, which is very important and often overlooked, that we should be very, very particular about assessing and removing the biofilm and organic debris. And biofilm and organic debris is some sort of like, surrogate, or is sort of like, indication that that particular environment is more prone if these 2 things are available for the growth of Legionella. So this is a very these 3 steps are very, very important, and one must focus on that. Now, the water management program. In this program, basically the entire team must review the control measure, the whole water system. That is the first step. The second thing is that water utility must be monitored or must be analyzed time to time, and the main point of analysis for this water utility or using the water, that whether a new construction is like added, or it is just like the renovation, or like some new outlets and things like that is built. Then the treatment of products, change in the water utilization, and the water intake status is very important in order to analyze the water utility. The standard and regulation is the other part that one should never violate. One should try to keep the standard and regulation for the drinking water, potable water, or any other water system led by the local, state, and federal government, and they should meet or exceed those standards in order to prevent the Legionella or the Legionella outbreak. And very important that the people who involve in the water management program must be trained, and they must be updated time to time with any technique, regulation, mandate come.
Can you elaborate on the importance of periodical testing?
Yes, this is the another very significant step toward preventing the Legionella, is that make sure that you have a routine checkup of the water. 2 or 3 things is very essential here. The water testing must be performed in order to understand that whether Legionella is present or not. As I said earlier, monitor the temperature and pH to understand the suitability of growth. Biofilm, heterotroph organism, they are kind of supportive and surrogate to indicate that whether Legionella is more prone in that environment or not. Autotroph organisms, and taxonomic status, that if you have the Legionella or other bacteria, what species or genus is that? That is an additional help in order to ascertain that whether disease-causing organisms are there or not, and their concentration. If they are there, what is their concentration? So these are the very important, strategies so far testing is concerned. In a minute, the next slide is going to come. In this slide, I would like to emphasize about the surveillance program. Our surveillance program is very important because it is the program which really help us to monitor the efficacy, the first thing, but at the same time that can be like helpful to evaluate the whole important point of preventing that whether the condition is like maintained appropriately to avoid the Legionella infestation or not. So in that term, the building water system need to be verified time to time on a periodical scale, that any kind of shortcoming must be appropriately addressed. When I say must be appropriately addressed, meaning that the control measures should be in place, that if something is broken, how we are going to address and how it need to be fixed. And then sample collection and testing is a very important step, and I would say an essential step in order to ascertain that the water which is flowing through the water system is free from Legionella bacteria. So this is the importance of the surveillance program, and that's why it should be taken on periodical basis.
Now that we've gone over the proactive measures, which include the preventative actions, a water management program, periodical testing, and surveillance program, can you go over the reactive measures?
Yes, the very first reactive step should be source identification. As you can see in this slide, that what is the potential source around a cluster or outbreak of Legionella, and then the other thing need to be analyzed, that what has prompted, or what are the potential factor which has prompted the outbreak in first place, and see whether the situation is out of hand. Is there any potential closure is required, meaning no further access to the building or to the place? So that can be done with the help of epidemiological data as well as the medical finding based on these two things, one can decide whether a potential closure is required or not. If it is required, make sure that it should be like contained. That particular environment must be contained so that no new individual or no new case come out as a result of those exposure. The other thing is that the follow-up sample collection must be done for testing, and that lead to the environmental microbiological investigation. As you can see in this picture, we have to be very specific. If a particular type of disease such as Legionella is reported, then we must ascertain that the organism which is responsible for causing the Legionella disease, such as Legionella pneumophila serogroup 1, must be tested, and it must be speciated. As you can see, one of the tests called as agglutination test is in place in order to test for Legionella pneumophila, and that is still treated as gold standard. And once it is there, then obviously it is easy to make a correlation. If there is another additional factor or supporting factor, that must be also taken under consideration when one respond in a reactive mode. The supporting parameter, as I was telling you, such as temperature, temperature, and the pH, must be tested in order to make sure that the water line is supportive of Legionella growth or not. And laboratory interpretation is a must, because that will tell you, or that will render all this information which I discussed in this slide. The other thing I have noticed that during the investigation of source causation, there are few things one need to pay attention, that whether it is a nosocomial or non-nosocomial, meaning that it is spread from a hospital environment or a non-hospital environment. It is cluster versus epidemic, meaning that this disease is in, or this outbreak is in a small packets like a cluster, or it is really grabbing a whole big geographical area or a lot of people involved in it. And then the risk factor must be analyzed by analyzing the other environmental condition and other supportive factor of the Legionella, and epidemiological data, if available, must be analyzed in order to respond, because if you have a previous episode of Legionella and previous episode of cluster or epidemic, that kind of situation, what was the outcome and how was that thing addressed, that must be taken account of in order to respond again if new episode happen. One thing which people obviously are not paying much attention, and especially the colleague over in the media, has a great responsibility to carry this information in an appropriate and right way, not making a news which create panic in the society, but one should definitely spread the news in a right way so that people make themselves aware and take appropriate step, not to expose themselves in the situation where a geographical area or a cluster of Legionella outbreak is reported. So that would be a very good practice if this is being communicated properly and appropriately to the people.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and give Dr. Sahai a quick speaking break, and we'll go ahead and show the second question. Go ahead and give everyone about 30 seconds again. What is an appropriate response to an outbreak of Legionella? Source identification, doctor's visit, potential closure, or both A and C? And we'll go ahead and close this question. Share the results with everyone. And 90% of you got it correct. The answer is both A and C. Those are the two things that are appropriate responses out of these ones listed for an outbreak of Legionella. Now we'll go ahead and continue the webinar.
Well, continuing to the reactive mode, it is also essential to design the corrective action in order to respond to Legionella. So what we should be doing for that, we should be doing a facility inspection, making sure that if the system, meaning the water system, is having any trouble, if any leak or any other situation may be influencing that whole water system, that must be noted and fixed appropriately. Again, we must collect the sample in order to test whether there is a Legionella or not. And obviously, the isolation of high-risk individuals such as elderly, kids, etc., must be identified in order to quarantine them first. And then the disinfection or the agent for disinfecting the entire water system is a must in order to respond a outbreak or the Legionella situation. In the next slide, I'm going to give you some other information how to make the disinfection or what are those disinfectant we can use. But before I go there, there is another very important point that each and every step we take to respond this Legionella outbreak must be evaluated for their efficacy, whether it is effective or not. For an example, that physical and chemical water condition, you verify whether the water which should be colorless. If you see that any kind of coloring water coming or water with lot of organic material coming in that, then that's not good, because that's maybe one of the reason which is supporting for the Legionella growth. The pH and the temperature is the another parameter one should be looking, as I keep telling during the presentation, that these are the two very important but very easy to assess parameters. Nature of disinfectant, like we should be using those disinfectant which is not like harmful to the individual or environment. Many a time people need to assess the chlorine residue. That kind of help to understand how much is residue, so that we have the appropriate disinfection. And then the co-occurring organism is the another parameter one should test in order to make sure that the Legionella controlling is working as it's supposed to. Now, many a time people ask me that what is the process of decontamination? As you can see in this slide, I have given a precise definition of decontamination process. So basically, it is a process for ensuring and removal of or neutralization or destruction of Legionella bacteria in and around human inhabitation. So that basically the process of decontamination. There are various methods and technology to ensure or to implement this process. For sake of explanation, that can be divided into two parts. One is the multi-barrier approaches and technology, and then the second part is the other strategies. So in the multi-barrier approaches and technology, you will be getting some information, and I will explain you on that one. The very important one is the chlorine or chlorine-based compound. Many times people ask me that what is the appropriate amount of chlorine to be used. That is, you see in this slide, 2 to 6 microgram per liter is an appropriate. Enhance the temperature. And then there is a formula CT, which is basically give you the amount of chlorine you should be putting. The monochloramine is the another residual disinfectant by which one can ascertain that you have enough disinfectant in the distribution system, so that you are not vulnerable for the Legionella disease or onset of Legionella disease.
Okay, and we're going to go ahead and take another quick break to do another question. Give everyone about 30 seconds again. What is an appropriate corrective action for Legionella contaminated water sources? Is it the beautification of buildings, closing of buildings, calling a Legionella expert, or disinfection? Wait about another 5 seconds or so before closing. And we're closing it now, and let's see how everybody did. And we got 56% of you getting the correct answer of disinfection. And now we will go ahead and continue the webinar.
Well, like I was mentioning that disinfectant is good, but we need to make sure that, like, what kind of disinfectant need to be used. Why? Because disinfectants are very effective and used as a biocide, but there is also risk involved, like a health problem, and that's why it is being regulated by the EPA. And especially for chlorine dioxide, the MRDL, those who don't understand MRDL, that is for maximum residual disinfectant levels. That what it means is not be exceeding 0.8 microgram per liter. That is being determined by the EPA, because then you will be start getting some health symptom. Next one, which is a very interesting one, that this basically work as a ionization technique in which the copper and silver ions are released in the water, and copper and silver ions along being understood as antimicrobial ions, and that take care of, like, Legionella, or it is having a lethal effect on the Legionella. So it has good antimicrobial properties, so that is being used as a modern technology, environmental friendly technology. The other technique by which the Legionella is controlled is using the ultraviolet light source, and especially it has been observed that 30 millijoule per centimeter square for 20 minutes is lethal for 99.999% Legionella on the log scale. So that is a very good one for inhibiting this pathogen. That is the technique. The other technique is the ozonization. It's a highly effective because it discharges the reactive hydroxyl radicals, and especially the dose. Many times people ask me the dose. The dose supposed to be 0.1 to 0.3 microgram per liter for 5 minutes, but it is rather a complicated phenomenon or complex process, and it takes a lot of expertise and other preventive action or preventive measure, I should say, that ozone should not be, creating the other problem while we are addressing one. The next one is the other strategy, and it's a very environmental friendly, I should say, because superfluous and superheat is identified very effective. The temperature should be raised to about 71 to 77 degrees for 10 to 30 minutes, and as the maintain a temperature of 65 degrees Celsius at the outlets, and that kind of prevent the Legionella, or if any Legionella is growing, then this is going to be also very effective. Shock hyperchlorination, use of chlorine and a little bit more, extra amount such as 20 to 50 milligram per liter is good scale to add chlorine. And point of use filtration is the another one, which is very effective because it basically gets rid of bacteria, especially the point of use when we put that kind of filter.
Okay, and now we'll go on to question 4 before we go on to the next slide. Which of the following techniques is effective in Legionella treatment? Increasing temperature, chlorine dioxide, ionization, or all of the above? Go ahead and give everyone about another 10 seconds. And we'll go ahead and close it. See how everyone did real quick. And looks like you all are paying attention. We got 100% of you getting the correct answer.
And the management, after all, is very important. How to manage the environment so that one should not, first of all, come in a situation where they require, the preventive action and corrective action. So basically, it needs to be water quality monitoring throughout the building and different water system. If it is a complex building water system, that is first thing. The water system management include, but not limited to, the system startup and a shutdown. Each day you should be paying attention on that, especially during the shut up and shut down, because lot of or organic material is being accumulated and that discharge all of a sudden during those actions. Routine system maintenance is a must, because that in my observation noticed that the first thing to go in lack of budgeting and things like that is the maintenance, but it is very important, so I want to pay attention on that. The renovation, construction, installation of water system is the another area where one should be paying attention. Equipment issues, it need to be run as per the manufacturer recommendation. It should not be going out of performance, so one should be making sure that it is performing as it is required. And then the surface interruption must be noted and appropriate action must be taken before any kind of interruption happen. Apart from that, temperature maintenance, extraction of debris and biofilm, and disinfectant, and maintaining the disinfectant level is the other measure one can take to manage the Legionella appropriately. I think these are some valuable points I touch upon today, Ronnie, and I believe in the next slide people can download the information which we have shared throughout our presentation. It was a 4-part webinar series, and that would be the important one, which Ronnie is going to share with you. But go ahead, Ronnie.
Right before we go ahead and end this webinar and tie it up, we'll have the last question, and it is: what is a good strategy for the management of Legionella? Is it water quality monitoring, always using a natural water source, trusting in the city water supply only, or always using cold water? Go ahead and give everyone about 10 more seconds so we can go ahead and close it up and know that we went a little bit over our half hour, and we do appreciate you coming in, listening to us, and staying around. And we'll go ahead and close the poll now. And once again, we got 100%. You guys were paying attention. We're a great audience. And now we'll go ahead and give you, let you all see the links that we have here for all of our previous videos or presentations and all the PowerPoints. Like I said, we have the handout, so that'll be available for you. And don't miss the Legionella Diagnostics to Detection at the Florida Buildings Engineering and Facility Maintenance Show on April 26th. Dr. Sahai will be there, and he will go ahead and give a presentation about Legionella as well. And if anybody has any questions for us, or if you are curious about any of our services or anything like that, we do have our contact information for the different departments here at Pure Air Controls. It's taking a little bit to load. There we go. And so we have everyone listed here, and there's Dr. Sahai's contact information should you have any further questions. Once again, I would like to say thanks to you for listening to us, and for anyone who may have been here for all 4 parts, for attending each and every one. And we hope to help you all out, and any future presentations we have, we hope to see you there again. Thank you.
Thank you.